Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Base or Based Conversations, depending on which way you lean. I'm your host, Pond, and I'm here joined by Warpath, creator of the Fire Emblem 8 ROM hack, The Seven Siblings, and very excited to have Warpath on the show. Warpath, in addition to working on his own hack, has done a lot of work helping me playtest on my own projects. I know he works pretty closely on a lot of others that are coming out, giving a lot of really great detailed feedback. And so, very excited to have Warpath here on the show today. Warpath, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Pondon. Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, of course. So, I know I sent you over some questions, and I'm going to try
hmm
and go through those and try and do this as organically as possible. It's still always a learning process, but I think it's always good to kind of start out with the beginning. And we're all Fire Emblem nerds here. So
Yeah,
how did you get into Fire Emblem? What was kind of your introduction to the series?
yeah. So I think I told you or maybe Chair this story before, but when I was growing up, money was kind of tight when I was a kid, and so to get uh like Game Boy games and things, what my family would do, we'd just like go on eBay and buy this like mystery lot of like 20 cartridges, like 20 different games, and you really don't know, and they're not like popular games either. Like they're just you
Sure.
just kind of get what you get. And so I got one of those probably in like, how old was I? I'm guessing this is like '05 or '06.
Great years.
And yeah, yeah. So yeah, back in the day when I was like 9 or 10 years old, and one of those games was a Sacred Stones cartridge. I had never heard of Fire Emblem before. Um, Not really at all. I hadn't even played like Smash Brothers at that time in my life either, so I had no idea really what Fire Emblem was. So I got this cartridge and I just played it. Like I remember the night I got it, I literally stayed up until like 4 a.m. playing Sacred Stones, and I got to like the very end of the game, like I think the penultimate chapter when you're fighting like Leon. And at that point, I was really bad at the game. I didn't like kill off all my bad units, but I literally just never deployed them. Like I think I only deployed like Seth, Ephraim, Dwessel, and Garrick, like
That's
the
a
entire
that's a
time.
that's a powerful quartet. I mean, I
Like
think
I,
I think if you talk to a pro player or anyone who plays, like, I say pro player very loosely. If you're talking to someone who
yeah,
does like
yeah,
an LTC, they're probably using the same squad. So in your verdant noobish ways, I think you stumbled upon greatness.
yeah. I mean, I remember I got like I recruited like Amelia, and I'm like, she's like so bad. Like, why would you ever use her ever? Like, she's just gonna die. And I just took all her things and then undeployed her. But and then I got all the way to the end, and I was going to kill Leon because Seth doubled, but then he got crit and died. And I got so mad because that chapter was so long, and then I didn't touch the game for like a year. Um,
So you got all the
but
way
then
to the penultimate chapter in one evening and then didn't touch it for another year. You just binged
yes,
super hard on Sacred Stones.
yes, exactly. At the age of like 10,
I
and
got to give you a lot of credit to get that far on a first run playing the game blind as a 10-year-old. That's, should give yourself a pat on the back for
yeah, I
that one.
mean,
That's not easy.
it was it was Sacred Stone's easy mode,
Oh.
so like it's like
So modest.
not that impressive. And I'm pretty sure I killed off like half of the recruitable characters and like didn't even know what a side objective was. So it's really not like optimal. It sounds like, oh, like optimal play, but it really was not. It was really just like soloing the game with like Seth and Ephraim. But yeah, so got back into it a year later, a little more mature, and really got into Sacred Stones. Loved it a lot. Played that cartridge quite a bit, and ended up a few years later was able to get my hands on a copy of Path of Radiance that I borrowed from my cousin and never returned, and then got Radiant Dawn super cheap, so got really good mileage out of those, and then got more into like emulation and stuff like in high school. So yeah.
Pretty cool, man. So that's and that sentence there, you got Path of Radiance for free and Radiant Dawn for quote very cheap. I'm sure there are people listening right now being like, that is not fair. But we were ahead of the curve as old timers.
I know, I know, I
So
know. It like baffled me. I think I bought Radiant Dawn like I think like less than a year after it came out, and it was literally like $20 on eBay, and which was insane to me. So like looking back now, I could go sell that disc for probably 100+ bucks.
yeah,
So
dude, a 5x return on that investment. It's pretty sick how much more popular those games have gotten. And I guess kind of in line with that, what are some of your favorite vanilla games from the series? What did you like about those?
yeah, for sure. So I don't know. My favorite game is kind of changes. I like them all for different reasons. I really love Radiant Dawn because of and you'll hear me talk about this a lot, but like I love the gameplay story integration. I love the kind of like how you sometimes are just thrown into a situation with a bunch of really random units that you have to try and complete an objective with. I think that's really fun and can be different on subsequent playthroughs. So I really like Path of Radiance quite a bit. I love GBA Fire Emblem. Probably played it the most by far. Beaten Sacred Stone so many times. I love FE7, Hector Hard Mode. I've played a whole bunch of times. Um, as far as newer games, um, I think like 3DS Fire Emblem's pretty fun. Like I have like fun with it on the first playthrough, but it just really doesn't have the replay value for me. I think part of that's just the lack of nostalgia, but
Yeah,
they're fun enough. They're fun enough in their own right. And
yeah,
just recently started getting into like SNES, Fire Emblem, played some FE4, a little bit of FE3, and hopefully gonna start playing Thracia soon. So I like them all for different reasons. If I had to choose one that was my favorite, I would probably say Radiant Dawn. But yeah.
yeah. No, totally makes sense, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think the and it sounds like I'm agreeing with your opinion like it's fact, but it's I mean I think it resonates with me as well. Like I like in
Yeah.
Radiant Dawn that you're constantly switching between the parties. The gameplay story integration is, I would say, probably like among the best in the series overall. Like I think some games do it really well and other games don't. Like I think I think Thracia does it really well on the whole, and it's probably one of its
That's what I've heard.
strengths.
Yeah.
And like even and what I love about good gameplay story integration is that sometimes like it's so true to the story that it actually makes the gameplay worse than if they like tried to remove itself a bit more like they do in some other games. So I
FE4.
appreciate I appreciate Kaga for that one.
Yeah, for sure.
And so kind of having this experience then with all these different games, you mentioned you got into emulation, you've done some SNES stuff. How did you get into ROM hacking? What was your introductory experience?
Yeah, so I think my introduction was near the end of high school, beginning of college, right around then. So a few years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I wanted to play FE6, and of course, when you want to play FE6, if you don't want to play in Japanese, you're gonna have to patch a ROM or figure out something. And so I went on Serenus Forest and looked up some stuff, and so was able to find a way to patch in FE6 ROM so I could play with Roy and the boys um, on FE6. And around that time, I don't even know how, but on like the website that I found, um, the FE6 English patch on, there was a there was a patch for I think like a 7 chapter demo of Road to Ruin or something like that. It was a
Oh wow.
pretty early, like a pretty early release version. And this was not like FE. This was not like a Fire Emblem website. This is like a jank, like ROM website. So
Yeah.
I don't know how it got there. And I think they might have even had the pre-patched ROM too, which is hilarious. But um, So I downloaded that too and played it and liked it, but didn't really like understand what I was playing. Like I had like played some like Pokemon hacks and like things
Sure.
before, but I didn't realize this was like a thing that people did. I thought that this was maybe just like something like a single person, had done, but that there wasn't like people who did this, and so played FE6, and then just kind of went on with my life for a while, and then a couple years later, I kind of was back on a Fire Emblem binge again, and just looking for games to play, like replaying all the games I had played beforehand and things like that. And I came across The Last Promise and was able to play The Last Promise, and then I went on and played a couple others. I played Requiem. I played a full version of Road to Ruin. I think I was actually able to take my save from like the old version of like the 7 chapter like demo version, which was pretty hilarious
That's pretty
at the
cool. Yeah.
time, that I had played like 2 years before. And then I kind of started to realize that that hacking was like something that like people did and people like actively did, and I discovered um, what like FE Builder was, because I'd messed around. I think I'd messed around with Nightmare before, just like basically just using it as like cheat codes, essentially, just like changing base stats and things like that. Um, nothing really hacking per se, but like I realized that like wow, there's like a whole new world out there, and I like around this time last year, I like discovered like Rage Fest and like old like FE3 videos and stuff like that. So like yeah, I was like, wow, this is like a lot of people do this, and like maybe I can do it too. And so didn't really get to doing that to myself until like I started grad school a year ago, and started hacking and playing Fire Emblem a lot more. Hilariously, because I had no friends, because I moved to a strange place where I had no friends and had a lot of free time.
Sure.
So that was kind of how my hacking career was born, and found FEU and kind of got plugged in there and everything. And yeah, it's been a really great ride these past like 8 or 9 months. So yeah.
Very cool, man. That's a it's a cool story. So I always find it interesting learning about kind of how people stumble upon ROM hacking, and I feel like I mean
Mm-hmm.
I had a similar experience, kind of getting into emulation because I so desperately wanted to play FE6, and
Mm-hmm.
even to like this day, like all of the like I have this massive folder on my hard drive where I just keep all of like my ROMs and of all games that I own, of course, but all of my ROMs, and the folder is just still called FE6. It's still the FE6 folder, even though it's like everything that I have. So it's
Mm-hmm.
pretty cool to see that. So so you mentioned like 8 or 9 months you've been around the community. So talk to me about let's shift gears a little bit. Talk to me a little bit about Seven Siblings. Kind of what was the impetus for your project? You messed around with Nightmare. You'd gotten into FE Builder. Kind of what kind of was the spark that was like, I want to do this, and this is the concept that I want to bring to life.
Yeah. Um, so FE Builder, uh, or not FE Builder, Seven Siblings is kind of based around like it's basically just like a culmination of just like a bunch of like stories that I've like made in my head ever since I was a little kid. So like the main scare character is kind of like a caricature of myself, and then like the siblings are like caricatures of my 6 siblings, and then the mom's like a caricature of my mom. Pretty much every character in the game is like loosely based off of like somebody or multiple people that I've like met in real life, and who like in their life has never like thought of, when you're a kid you think of like stories of like you imagine yourself like going and doing something or being part of a big grand adventure or something like that.
Sure.
And so that was kind of how the idea got started in my head. And actually hacking kind of started as an outlet for me. So like for those of you that haven't played Seven Siblings, like a lot of the plot revolves around like the character's mom and how she's sick and how she still like cares about her family. And so actually um like 8 months ago or so, my mom was actually diagnosed with cancer. Um, and so hacking actually became like kind of a little bit of an outlet for me to like express myself or to express my feelings about like how I was feeling about that and how my family was dealing with that and everything. So it comes from like a pretty personal place as far as that goes. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
and so and so like I kind of had I kind of even just the first couple chapters that I started working on it, I think I was just like messing around and just like trying stuff out. Like, oh, let's put a village here, and let's spawn some reinforcements here, and just kind of learning the ropes. And I was like, well, I might as well throw in some dialogue because I need to like see how this works. So I wasn't even like initially planning to like make a hack or anything like that. I was just kind of throwing stuff together. If you've ever played like the first draft of like my prologue chapter, you could definitely see that there was very little intelligent design going into that.
Sure.
Um, being a big open field with a river down the middle. Um, and then it just kind of went from there. Like I threw some stuff together and I was like, hey, like maybe I could actually make like a story arc out of this because it was already kind of something like I had already been imagining myself. And so I decided to make a couple more chapters and then a couple more chapters after that. Uh, and then after that, I kind of cobbled together the story based on like not like an overarching idea, but I'd call it like a bunch of like different like story arcs that I'd had like inspiration for,
Mm-hmm.
like sometime in the past, and then I just kind of put them together to form a more cohesive story with the same characters and everything like that. So that's kind of how it worked. It kind of almost happened by accident, um, but yeah, just kind of started messing around and then kind of ran with it.
Pretty cool, man. Pretty cool. And that's it's pretty interesting because I think it's so easy like when you're testing and you're kind of like getting into a groove with it, you want to just keep going, and I think that's a good way just to
Mhm.
experiment, just kind of dive in, learn some stuff, and then like go back and fix it and make it better and weave it into a larger narrative. So I guess like with that,
Mhm.
as as you put it, intelligent design, as you started thinking a little bit more about design after you kind of like learned the basic mechanics of putting a river on a field and putting enemies and loading players and all this kind of stuff. When you're thinking about like designing a gameplay experience, and I know like from playing the game as well, like the gameplay definitely improves pretty drastically after like the first couple of chapters where you, as you put it, messing
For sure.
around. So I'm curious, kind of like inspiration wise or just like design philosophy, were there certain things from other FE games that you wanted to highlight or base your game around? Was there anything in particular that you didn't like from other games that you wanted to avoid? Talk to me more about just the design philosophy of Seven Siblings.
Yeah, so when I initially started, I think like what I wanted it to be was I was kind of not confident in my idea to like balance a game or to make a an engaging game from scratch. So what I did is I kind of tried to just like pattern the design of chapters and the map design and the enemy density and things off of Hector Hard mode because in my opinion, like Hector Hard mode's probably my favorite um, gameplay of the GBA series, and so I was like, all right, well, if this is, I have kind of a template for what I'm going to do, so I'm going to do this. So that's kind of where a lot of my maps, or I don't know, a lot of the early maps especially have pretty high enemy density, largish, largish maps, and things like that. Pretty enemy phase oriented gameplay. And so I started doing that, and it definitely got refined as I played it myself and got feedback from you and from other people. Um, but then as as I like played other hacks and like so I played Vision Quest, I played some Souls of the Forest and things like that. I played The Heroes We Deserve. I started to like see that like the GBA engine was capable of a lot more than like what Hector Hard Mode was. So like I went with Hector Hard Mode balancing because I knew it was enjoyable and I knew you could do it with the way GBA was set up. And so I just went with that, but it kind of opened my eyes like, oh, you can make it more player phase oriented. You can, do kind of weirder, different things with the AI and stuff like that. So a lot of my more recent chapters have been, I'd say, a lot more influenced by that, a lot more player phase oriented and things like that. I think just to like boil it down to it, I think like initially I tried to like base my game off of Hector Hard Mode and off of Radiant Dawn as far as the like gameplay story integration because those are like two of the most like enjoyable experiences I'd had, and I'd still say that's fairly true. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I've diversified like a lot in um, how that can be accomplished or what each individual chapter is going to look like.
So
So, and it's still evolving too. So,
so true, and it's I think it's always really interesting because you can kind of see, and I think depending on like the project creator and kind of how they're developing the project, I think in some cases like chapters will get better as they go because the person doing it, especially if it's their
mm-hmm,
first time, kind of starts to find themselves a little bit more and get some better ideas and is a little bit more ambitious and can execute on those a bit better.
mm-hmm,
Like I know for me at least, like I felt like there were some chapters early on in Vision Quest that were kind of weak, and then some ones that were a bit stronger. And that was just like a function of like, oh, I'm just getting better at this as I go
oh yeah,
and
for sure.
getting feedback, but also like you said, taking inspiration from elsewhere and really seeing what is possible in the GBA engine, that you can really reinterpret the formula that vanilla games often present to the player. So that's pretty cool, man. But when you're actually building the game, you know, what's your process like? Because I think for a lot of people who are new to ROM hacking, or you hear about a lot of projects that don't get finished, they kind of get like
Mm-hmm.
bogged down in like the scope creep, or dev hell as some might call it. But
Mm-hmm.
procedurally, like what's worked for you and just allowed you to just like churn out chapters quickly, efficiently? What's your process like? Share that for the with the audience for me.
Yeah, I'd say that. Um, so I kind of like my vision. So I kind of have like an overarching, kind of general idea for where the story is going to go, but I really don't know the specifics probably for except for the next 2 to 4-ish chapters of when I'm working on it. And so I kind of break my hack down into like 2 to 4 chapter arcs, basically, where I know where the story's heading. I know that a rough idea or inspiration for a map. I know where I want the gameplay to go, and then I go from there. So I usually start with a map. Just make a map, even if it's pretty bad. Just get some kind of idea or some kind of concept of what I want this chapter to look like. Because I think the map, I mean, the player's going to be staring at it a lot. You're going to be, looking at it a lot in development. And so I usually start with that, and then from there, I usually just uh, make write some dialogue, create an opening event and an ending event. Doesn't need to be fully evented or anything like that. Usually add in more fancy events like scripted battles or map movement or things like that afterwards. But just throw in some dialogue, and then throw some enemies onto the map based on the story and based on generally how I think it's good. And then from there, I just kind of play test it and tweak it. So I pretty much just play the chapter as I'm editing it and tweak it. And one of the nice things about that is that I usually have a save file right around the current chapter I'm working on, which is really useful for balancing and things like that, because I can have a rough idea of where your units are at, what kind of resources the player has available at the time, and then I tweak and I polish the enemy, I tweak the objectives, usually shorten them or shrink the map by quite a bit because I tend to make giant maps. Um, and kind of go from there and add more and more polish. Then I'll go back and I polish the events and things like that. As far as like assets and like resources, so that's kind of like my process for a chapter. As far as assets and resources, what I usually do is the first time something, so say like a new character is going to be introduced into the hack, what I like to do is I like to either make like a quick repalette, a splice, or find like a free to use mug that I think is like a good placeholder and is like a good enough concept for what I want this character to be, and like throw it in there. And same thing with classes too. Like I'll throw in like map sprites or animations as like they're I want them to be introduced into the story. I don't have it all like mapped out in advance or anything like that. I kind of, as I encounter it or as I need it, I kind of throw it in there. Um, and that actually I found is a pretty good thing. So I'll do that like before like the whole like map making and chapter making process, and that is a nice little break from what can be sometimes the tedium of playtesting and enemy placement and dialogue writing and insertion, because that stuff can burn you out pretty quickly. So it's kind of fun every once in a while to make a mug or make a map sprite or like try and come up with like what are this character's growth's going to be or something like that. So that's
Sure.
kind of in general what I do. And then of course every 5 or 6 chapters I like to give the entire hack a big playthrough from the beginning, and then tweak things. So yeah, that's kind of how it's gone up until now, and this worked decently well for me.
Sure. And then thank you for sharing that. There's a lot of good insight to take away. I think the biggest takeaway is for me and all that is the approach of not trying to completely polish the chapter your first attempt building
Mm-hmm.
it, because you will go back and edit it. You will want to change things. You As you play through it and experience it as the player as best as you can, as the person who kind of knows like where all the surprises are coming and where things are going, when you're putting yourself into the place of the player, it's so much easier to figure out what's missing. And so I totally agree with you that starting just with a rough concept and just nailing down the map first, and just having the rest of the stuff kind of just like loosely storyboarded out can be really
Mm-hmm.
effective in getting things done quickly, because you can totally get like lost in the shuffle, and the tedium of certain things. And that kind of brings me to another point, just like what do you like doing the most, right? Like I feel like hacking is such a diverse thing in Fire Emblem. There's so many different aspects to it. I know Peerless likes to talk about being a strong generalist hacker. Um, so I'm
Mm-hmm.
curious, like for you, what as a solo developer, you're doing it all. What do you like doing the most, and what do you find to be most annoying?
Uh, I really like making maps and doing enemy placement and kind of seeing how that. I don't know. I just think I like it's I don't know how to describe it, but I like so I'm playing through my own hack, right? I have my team of like 15 or so characters that I have a save file for, and I'm literally like writing the next step of their adventure. And so I love like creating a map or creating objects on the map, enemies, and seeing how like these characters that I've already grown attached to, like how they then interact or in how the player interacts with what I've put on there. So uh, I guess this is kind of general, but I guess I just really the part I love about hacking most is just my ideas coming to life. I guess,
Sure, no, that makes total
and that's
sense.
and like I don't know. I like it when it all comes together. I like when like the reinforcements come at just the right time, or the item that I gave the player comes in handy the next chapter or something like that. I like you know making a map sprite and being looking at that map sprite and being like, oh, that's like perfect. That's exactly what I wanted when I thought of it in my head. So I don't know. I guess there's no single like specific thing that I really like, and I think all of it I can get bored of. I get bored of text really, really easy. That's
Sure.
like I'd say like writing like, and I've gotten better at it because and your feedback helped a lot with that too. But like it was just I think like I can get just bored pretty quickly of like writing like, oh no, we're being under attack, we need to fight. That just gets really pretty boring for me. But yeah, I'd say just like making the gameplay is probably my favorite part.
Sure.
Which from my
Yeah.
reviews of your chapters probably isn't that surprising to you, but
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I definitely enjoy the map making part as well. So totally get it. Um, but cool, man. So kind of speaking of like, obviously, we talked a little about like the feedback you've gotten. What have your thoughts been on reception so far? I know when I played, the hack was only like 2 months old. Like I was playing like a super raw version of it, and there's like what, like 7 or 8 chapters at that point, maybe as many as 10. Um, how are you feeling about reception? What's been surprising, satisfying, helpful? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, I think the number one surprising thing is that people actually play it. I think like like I wasn't even sure if I wanted to post it because I was like, I don't know, I'm just kind of doing this for me, but I ultimately did post it because I'm like, maybe somebody will enjoy it, maybe I can get some cool feedback or whatever. It'd be, a good way to, good way to, you know, be able to refine it a little bit and things like that. So I think that's just the number one, is that people actually play it. I think it's in general, um, I think in general the feedback's been like pretty positive. Not in that like I created a masterwork or something, but people have been really encouraging, of the process and encouraging of the progress that I've made in my ideas, even if my execution isn't where I would like it to be at this point. So I think I've just been super encouraged by everybody that's played it and shown interest and support for the hack. Um, yeah, I think that's the big thing. And I think I haven't really had anybody say that like, oh, this is like the greatest hack ever, I really love it, which I wouldn't expect them to, because I don't think that. I think what I'm going for is just an enjoyable experience. It doesn't need to be Thracia 776. It doesn't need to be Staff of Ages. It could just be a fun little hack with likable characters and little story and decent gameplay that you just play for a few hours. And I'm perfectly fine with that. So I've been pretty excited for that. And as I've gotten more and more involved with the community, I've gotten more and more exposure, which has been pretty cool. And I'm planning a pretty sizable release, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. So hopefully you get a little bit more interest drummed up in it. But yeah, really, really been pleased and encouraged by everybody's reactions so far. All the criticism has been constructive and everything. So yeah.
That's great. I would say in general, I think the people who are inclined to take interest in hacking projects very early in their development are also usually more inclined to be, as you said, encouraging and constructive.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I feel like if you're not as inclined that way, you might look at it and be like, this is super unpolished. What are you doing? It's not done. Like, come back to
Mm-hmm.
me when it's finished later, kid. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I think there are other people who will just like see kind of the potential of it and see like who's the person behind this and what are they trying to achieve with it, and do I think that this person
Mm-hmm.
wants to execute on good ideas and has like the drive to actually make something, and like how can I help them achieve that, because it's always cool to see new projects come out and have more games to play, because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge proponent. I think playing Fire Emblem game blind is just super super fun, and it's something
Mm-hmm.
that vanilla, there's only been 15 games and like 15 things we can play
Exactly.
blind, really. And so getting new ROM hacks is a pleasure. I mean, we'll have three houses in actually like a month from today, which is pretty cool. Um,
Yeah, but it's been like 3 years since Echoes came out, so
I know.
it's
Has it been
it's
three
definitely a treat.
years?
That's one thing I think so. 2 years, maybe 2 years, 2.5 years,
I thought
maybe.
it was
I don't know.
2017, but yeah, I think
You might
it's
be
been a
right.
while. It's been a while.
But yeah, that's another thing too. Is I've just really enjoyed like play testing other ROM hacks and just getting inspiration from them and being able to encourage other people. Because like I said, like hacking's been like a great outlet for me. It's become one of, if not my like biggest hobby, like over the past few months. So like it's been really cool to like invest and encourage other people too, be able to like play this game and be like, hey, like this is something brand new. This is this doesn't exist anywhere else, and so that's pretty cool.
For sure. And so you mentioned that you have a release coming out, which is really exciting. Who else should we thank for your project's creation? I know you're working predominantly on your own, but is there anyone that you want to give a shout out to who's been helpful along the way? And I'm not saying this to like shill myself.
I mean, you have been super helpful. Your Let's Play was both like super informative in terms of like the game itself, and also just like super encouraging because it's just like really cool to see like somebody else playing something you made. Um, and so yeah, really appreciated that. Chair has been super helpful in a number of ways, both like the heroes we deserve. I actually pretty frequently refer to the heroes we deserve for like fancy eventing and stuff because I think it has pretty high production value. Um, and so Chair's been pretty supportive. Uh, who else? I guess Sneck helped get me up off the ground. He pretty much taught me how to make maps that didn't look like trash. Um, so he was super helpful and took a lot of inspiration from Avenir too, because Avenir is pretty much about as outside the box as you can get with for a hack. So definitely took some inspiration from that. Skryza, Souls of the Forest, has been inspirational as well. And yeah, just lots of other people too. Lots of other people that have been super helpful in one way or another. So yeah.
For sure. And you kind of touched on some of these other folks and projects that you're interested in, I guess. What are some projects specifically that you're excited about, and just kind of what's your favorite project in the community right now overall? Like, what are you most stoked to see continue on forward?
Yeah, so I'm excited to see the Heroes We Deserve. The full beta should probably be coming out pretty soon, so pretty excited for that. I mean, you've played it. A lot of the viewers have probably played it, but it's pretty unique in terms of what it's going for in its whole tone. So I enjoyed that a lot. Faith and Blood, after live streaming it, pretty pumped for part 2 release because I think it's pretty well done, pretty polished, and so liking that a lot. And I guess the last one would be Vision Quest because I've been, you know, helping you play test it, and so really pumped to see more of that come out. I think Vision Quest is a pretty good, as you described it, like all arounder type hack where um, it's just solid all around, and I enjoy like the story, I enjoy the gameplay, I enjoy the characters, I enjoy the aesthetics, and so yeah, overall, I think Vision Quest, I'm really excited for as it nears a full beta release. So yeah.
Sweet man, thank you. Yeah, hopefully we'll get a release out soon. We're getting closer and closer every day. It's a process, but we'll see. But
Mhm.
cool, man. Well, this has been super fun. Thanks again for taking the time to come chat. I guess, was there anything else you wanted to share with the viewers out there?
uh, I guess just that I don't know if you guys are any like an aspiring hacker out there. We all started somewhere. I would suggest just diving into it, making something, starting from there. And yeah, hit me up if you're interested in the project and want updates or want to help me out with art or gameplay or playtest or anything. Just hit me up on FEU or Discord or join the Seven Siblings Discord. And yeah, for sure. And stay tuned for the next release coming out. Pretty excited about it because it's some more intricate eventing and objectives than I've done before. So pretty excited to get feedback on it. So yeah.
Excellent. That sounds great, man. And I'll put a link to your thread in the description as well, so folks can take a look there and get all the info they need to help you out and play the game. So, without further ado, thanks again, Warpath, for joining me. Really good and fun conversation. Always interesting to hear kind of how everyone works and what they're into. So thanks again, and I'm looking forward to the next release.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thanks for having me. Have a good night.
Thanks. You too, man. Take care.